when Bruce Feldman was here a couple of weeks ago, and Bruce is here every week, I made the point, and I think I made Bruce blush, but I mean it. I pay for my Athletic subscription, and I'm happy to do it because it has such great writers like Bruce, like Jordan Rodriguez, like this guy right here, Mike Sando, who joins us live from the Athletic live on the video conferencing, however the heck we're doing it. And Mike does great stuff on the NFL and is co-author on a book as well called The Football 100, which just hit the bookstores. Mike, good to see you. How are you, man?
Hey, it's good to see you, Andrew. Glad to be here. We're almost halfway through this season.
Yeah,
so
hard to believe.
Yeah.
And are you with me, though, that because we no longer have a 16-game season, the math feels off on everything? Like we can't exactly – we're not at the halfway point. Really?
So here's the deal. I being kind of nerdy, I actually calculated the number of games. So it'll be exactly at 50% of the games played after the Monday night game this week. That's the true midseason. So
272 divided by 2, that's after Monday night.
That'll be after Monday night. So that's the true midpoint of the season. I felt better after learning that.
Okay. I feel better after you doing the math now. Thank you, Mike. Because I had this issue with the quarter poll with Eric at home when we were doing our power rankings on NFL.com. Yeah. I'm like, we're not really at the quarter point. I guess we're actually at the quarter point like after the first quarter of week 5. All right, people are turning off their radios.
I did third. I was like, okay, after 6 weeks is now the third? Is that what we're doing? I don't know. So
that's cleaner. Yeah. Speaking of math, you guys have your Football 100. And it's not the first time in any sport, or in the NFL for that matter, because we just had the 100th anniversary a couple of years ago as well, where we try to rank the top 100 players. It's difficult, though, with the changing eras and the way the game is played now as opposed to the way it was even 10 years ago or 20 or 50 or 100 years ago. How did you guys grapple with ranking players considering for so many of them they played a vastly different game than the one we have now?
Yes. So looking at the list of 100, there are 19 quarterbacks and there are 14 running backs. So that is showing you positional importance was mattering. In the old game, running backs were a bigger part of how you won the game, right? So Jim Brown's number 2. Now, in the last 50 years or so, 45 years, it's been quarterback. The era stuff to me is hard to solve with linemen, and some positions, but I thought it's kind of fun to solve at like running back and wide receiver. And so the way I did it, I'll tell you, like with receivers, I kind of looked at all the great receivers and I learned that we should really be measuring about 8 seasons for a wide receiver. So you're going to have about 8 elite seasons if you're really good. So that doesn't mean your first 8 seasons. What I did was I took every receiver in history. I had like a 30,000 row export of data. And I took their 8 best seasons in relation to their peers in a given year for receiving yardage. So if you led the league in receiving in 1985, that to me is the same as leading the league in receiving in 2007. It doesn't mean we're saying that 2007 and 85 are the same, but we're measuring you again. How great were you compared to your peers, right? So when I did that for the top 8 seasons of all the receivers, Jerry Rice and Don Hutson were number 1 because they led the league in receiving like 6-7 times. Randy Moss was number 3 if we averaged out kind of where he was in his 8 best seasons relative to his peers. Surprise here, Tory Holt was number 4. Steve Largent, Julio Jones, Marvin Harrison, James Lofton, Larry Fitzgerald, Reggie Wayne. We heard from Michael Irvin. I think he was 14th or 15th when I did that. So I used that to kind of inform how we were going to put them on this list. They didn't all make it, but did the same thing at running back. And really, it was just scrimmage yards for the top rushers. So Marshall Faulk was pretty high because he affected the game in more than one way, obviously, not just a rusher. So I thought that's a fun way to do it, just measuring against your peers in yardage, which is a pretty good measure.
I love it. But you said Tory Holt there, who I'll admit here is a friend. He is I
like him too.
He's not in the Hall of Fame yet, but Isaac Bruce is, Orlando Pace is, Kurt Warner is, Marshall Faulk is. Now you can't put everyone from the Greatest Show on Turf in. You already have 4. Jackie Slater 5. So he would be the 6th if he were to get in. Yet he's not in your top 100, even though you just said that using your metric, the way you rank receivers, he's 4. Why?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So I think I'm on the Hall of Fame committee. He will get in. He's gotten close, and that just happens at wide receiver. We have guys come up against each other that they don't all get in for a while. Then they sort of take their turns getting in. He'll get in. I think he's underappreciated because he didn't have as long of a career. He wasn't around as long, but when you really look at the seasons he did play, they were all elite. So I think some of that just has to be bridged in our mind of like, hey, his elite production's as good as almost anyone's elite production in the history of the league. When we did this list initially, I didn't have that research done. In the end, I wasn't necessarily sure where to do it. The receivers that we have on there are a mix. It's not just going off of this strictly, but we did move Julio Jones probably higher than we would have had him because of this. He's at 56. I think who else did we move on? Oh, Steve Largent, I think, was somebody who retired as the all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, which has only been done a few times. So he definitely needed to be on the list. But there were a few guys up there. Like when I did that measure of the elite production, there were some surprising guys. Like we said, Holt was high. Jimmy Smith came in at 13 between T.O. and Calvin Johnson.
Wow. Jaguars Jimmy Smith.
Jaguars Jimmy Smith. So what I'm saying is there's no final list that's absolutely 100% correct, right? You can't do it. But the learning, like these are all things I'm kind of synthesizing in my mind as I think of these guys. You don't want to just rely on stats, but I think I've come closer to at least contextualizing the elite performance at the position. And this says maybe Tory Holt should be part of that. Maybe Tory Holt should be rethought. I covered him. I like him as well, and I've advocated for him for the Hall of Fame. He ended up not being one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 wide receivers on here: Jerry Rice, Don Hudson, Randy Moss, Julio, Largent, Lance Allworth, Lenny Moore, Crazy Legs, Hirsch, and Paul Warfield. So that spans the eras. We tried to be fair, but we definitely left off some guys who could be on the list.
Well, my dad, the Browns fan, loves that Paul Warfield is in there. And again, the book is the Football 100, with number 1 being Tom Brady, number 2 being Jim Brown, number 3, Jerry Rice, Jim Rice, not that guy. Then Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Walter Payton, Johnny U, and then the late, great Dick Butkus, who we just lost at number 10. Otto Graham, dad, is number 11. The wide receiver thing is so difficult, too, because I'll be the orange man here and remind people growing up outside D.C. that the day Art Monk retired, who was not on your list, and no one thinks of Art Monk as one of the top 5 or 10 wide receivers to ever play the game. But the day he retired, he had more receptions than anyone in the history of the game. Anybody. Yeah. Now, he has since been passed by countless guys, but the day he decided to hang it up, he was the most prolific receiver in terms of receptions to ever step on a football field. And yet he had to wait a long time to get into Canton.
I just pulled him up on my little thing here. He came in at 42 on that measuring of the 8 seasons. And the reason for that, just looking at it here, is that he basically had maybe about 5 really elite seasons in relation to his peers. And then he had his 6, 7, and 8 seasons pull him down by this measure. It doesn't mean this is the measure we have to use, but he had a long career with some great seasons, but maybe fewer great high production seasons as some of the others.
Yeah. It's a different game. It's a changing game. Let's talk about the modern game here, Mike Sando, real quick. From where you sit, not what went down, but moving forward, how do you think this Raider thing plays out?
Well, I think they all got a shot in the arm because of the culture change. It's hard to be losing, but it's really hard to be losing when it's not that fun to come to work anyway. And I think we saw a New England export into the Raiders, and so there's a little bit of a bump. I did like the fact that Mark Davis acknowledged that he made critical mistakes with a bad process in hiring. He basically admitted that he was locked on predetermining his target when he was still in the huddle. He wanted John Gruden, had to have him. He wanted Josh McDaniels, had to have him. And then because he had Josh McDaniels and Josh wanted to have Dave Ziegler as a GM, he did that too. So that's not a good hiring process. He's acknowledged that. And so you would hope now what would play out of this is a little bit better process. The problem he has is he's involving guys from like yesteryear of Raider history in advising him on some of these things in the past. We've seen Ken Herock. There's I forget who it was, another former player. He's got to like make sure he's listening to the right people in building a process, because acknowledging bad process is the first step to recovery, but it doesn't mean you have a good process. It doesn't mean you have a good one. Yeah.
Mike, how do you think it, again, moving forward here, and they came off a big win a couple of weeks ago here, these New England Patriots, before losing in Miami. How do you think it ends between Kraft and Belichick?
So I think there has to be a push to comes to shove conversation about changes and whether or not Bill Belichick will be amenable to those. Now, some of this could also be where are they drafting? Like I was thinking about that. Do they have a quarterback solution? But I kind of feel like it feels to me like it's nearing the end. That there have to be difficult conversations after the season that maybe wouldn't sit well with everybody. So I think it's a big challenge.
Do you think there's a scenario in which he stays, but Kraft tells him, I'm taking away your GM power? Do you think he would ever agree to that?
Well, no, I think it's totally impractical, because who could be brought in that would actually be the real GM if Bill's there, right? You're not going to bring in someone over him, or even anyone's going to be subordinate to him and his personality and his strength in the building, right? I think that's impractical.
All right. And I'm with you on that one as well. I think if Kraft says, I don't want you buying the groceries anymore, I just want you cooking the meal, then, he's out of there. And then it turns to, do you think he goes somewhere else to coach? Is there another owner who would be willing to give a guy in his 70s a clean slate and say, go do it?
I got a question for you. Yeah. Where did Vince Lombardi finish his career?
With the Washington football team. They're not called the Commanders then. Are you saying you're smelling the same smoke?
Well, I'm just saying, if we're playing this game, where's a place that you think is likely to change no matter what happens the rest of the season, right? And then who's a new owner that could really use some juice and credibility in the league and some guidance of how to do this stuff, right? It would probably be Washington. They could use somebody like that. So I think there's some logic to that if we're just spitballing. And look, a lot of things would have to happen. He'd have to leave New England and want to coach and all of that. But that's kind of crossed my mind as something that could make sense for everybody. Historic franchise, looking for a fresh start with new owner who's looking for some credibility. It would certainly get a lot of people excited there, and might make sense.
There are a lot of people that are convinced Todd Bowles is out. There's a long season ahead of him. I mean, anybody could win the NFC South at this point. But if that were the case, how about build a Tampa following Tom? No, I'm kidding. That would never happen.
And bring back Tom,
right, and bring back Tom to
season.
Tampa then for Bill. Brockman, you cool with that one?
No.
Okay. But you should be cool with Mike's new book. It's called The Football 100. And Chris's guy, Tom Brady, not surprisingly, is number one. Mike, the thing looks fantastic over your shoulder. Can't wait to get my hands on it. Good luck to you. And I meant what I said. I love The Athletic. Read it first thing every morning. Hope our paths cross sometime soon.
Appreciate it.
Mike Sando, everybody.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.